In the second video of Lesson 3 on subtracting fractions, we will continue to look at modeling for fractions with unlike denominators. In this video, our focus will once again be on fraction strips and the number line. Our two types of questions: given a visual, determine the answer to a given subtraction calculation, and given the calculation, represent it and figure out the answer. Always remember about simplest form. And again, for the fraction strips and number line, we will consider subtraction as the idea of taking things away. Fraction strips and the number line. And in our first example, we're going to use the model to determine the difference. Well, first we need to actually figure out the subtraction calculation that we're representing here. So to do that, let's have a glance at the number line. We see our benchmarks of 0 and 1. And if we count the number of equal sections in between 0 and 1, we will count up 8, which means that our number line has been divided into eighths, which I'll pop in there. Okay, now for our first fraction, remember our minuend has to be the larger fraction. So the fraction strips on the bottom here, there are more of those fraction strips than what we have on top. There's a greater distance being covered off there. So we have 7 1/8 fraction strips, which would represent 7/8. If I look, starts at 0, ends at 7/8. And what we're going to take away, what we're going to subtract, is this 1/2 fraction strip. So I'm going 7/8, subtract a half. Let's see what we get. Well, I start at 0. I end off at 3/8. Or if you look at the fraction strips themselves, we have 3 1/8 strips. Whatever way you look at it, our difference in simplest form is 3/8. In example 2, we're going to use fraction strips on the number line to calculate 3/4 subtract 2/3. We first of all need to figure out what we're going to divide our number line up into. How many equal sections between 0 and 1? And to get that, we look at our denominators here. I have a 4 and a 3. We're going to try and figure out the LCD. If you know what it is right away, that's great. If you're not certain, well, we always have the option of listing off our multiples. And I'll list off some multiples of 3, 3, 6, nothing common, 3, 6, 9, nothing common, 3, 6, 9, 12, common. Okay. So we know that our LCD is 12. So if my LCD is 12, then my number line between 0 and 1 will be divided up into 12 equal sections, or twelfths. So now let's put down 3/4. So I'm going to put down 3 1/4 fraction strips. And what we have to take away are 2/3. So I'm going to put down 2 1/3 strips. So I need to take those away. I highlight what needs to go, draw on the arrow, remove them. There we go. Now what are we left with? Well, I have this little gray piece here. Starts at 0, ends at 1/12. So guess what? I can easily pop a 1/12 fraction strip over that. So what we've just determined is that 3/4 subtract 2/3 equals 1/12, which is simplest form. Let's look at another example. This time we have a 1/2 subtract 2/7. Let's go through the same process that we did in the previous example. So 2 and a 7 are my denominators. If you work through it, you will discover that the LCD is actually 14. So our number line goes from 0 to 1, and we split it into 14ths, labeled as so. The first fraction strip I'm going to put down now on my number line. The minuend is a 1/2. There's my 1/2 fraction strip. What do we got to take away? I got to put down 2 1/7 fraction strips to represent 2/7. I highlight that with the arrow, remove it, gone, and we're left with this piece of the pink here, this fraction of the half. And I start at 0, I end off at 3/14, and I can place 3 1/14 strips over that. Half subtract 2/7 gives us 3/14. Simplest form. Let's look at fraction strips in the number line a slightly different way with unlike denominators. So same types of questions again. It says use the model to determine the difference. Okay, number line, got our benchmark 0, 1, and as before, let's count those equal sections. And if I count up those equal sections, I will discover that there are 9, telling me that our number line has been divided into ninths. I pop them in there. Now we need a subtraction calculation that's being represented here. So if I look at where my fraction strip ends, that's at 5/9. Okay. And I'm taking away, there's that arrow again, going backwards. I'm taking away 1/3 because that's my fraction strip that I put there. 5/9 take away 1/3. Well, what I want to know is where I end up. And if I look, I see that it's at 2/9. So 5/9 subtract 1/3 equals 2/9. And that is simplest form. In our second example now, we're going to calculate 4/5 subtract 1/2. We want to figure out what our number line is going to look like first. So to do that, we go to the denominators of our minuend and subtrahend. We have a 5 and a 2. And if you go through the process, you will figure out that your LCD for those two denominators is 10. So we take our number line, and in between 0 and 1, we split it up into 10 equal sections and labeled as so. 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, and so on. We want to know where are we going to go to first on our number line to start this process. So I look at my minuend, my 4/5. I want to figure out, well, what's that over 10? So in other words, I need an equivalent fraction for 4/5. If I double up 5, I get 10. So I double up 4, and I get 8. That tells me, yep, I'm going to 8/10 on my number line first. Then I look at the calculation, and I'm told that I have to subtract 1/2. There we go. Taking away that 1/2. Now 1/2, if we consider its equivalent fraction for something over 10, then that will be 5/10. 1/2 is the same thing as 5/10. I could go 2 times 5, 1 times 5, 5 over 10. So I could, if I wanted to, replace that 1/2 fraction strip with 5 1/10. That's the same. To get my answer, to figure out the difference, well, I look at where I end up. And I see that we end up at 3/10. Right there. So what have we just figured out? Well, 4/5 subtract 1/2 equals 3/10. Once again, this answer is in simplest form. And now I would like you to proceed to the activities for Lesson 3.